Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. My name is Sam, and in today's video I wanted to share my July reading wrap up with you. July was a very successful reading month for me. I read a total of 12 books in July, which is honestly kind of unheard of. I have read, I think, 11 books in a month, but this just seemed like so much. At the beginning of July, I was working really hard to finish off my June TBR because there was books on my June TBR that I did really want to get to, and I wanted to read all of them. And also, obviously, I wasn't successful in my June TBR in terms of reading them in the month, but I did end up reading all of the books that I pulled. And then for July, I ended up reading 5 of the 6 books that I pulled on my July TBR. And I still haven't read the 6th one, but I'm planning on reading it over the weekend. So hopefully we're back on track and I can actually finish my TBR within the month from here to the end of the year. Without further ado, let's jump into the books that I read in July. Starting out the month, I read The Duke and I by Julia Quinn. This is the first book in the Bridgerton series. I ended up rating this book 3 stars. I surprisingly really enjoyed this one. I didn't think I was going to. I thought it was going to be very much like a typical historical romance where it was hard to follow and it just didn't make a ton of sense. But I surprisingly really enjoyed this. Obviously, it did follow the same plot as the first season of the show on Netflix, which I did find myself trying to compare and knew kind of what was coming. I do really enjoy all of the characters, and I like that we got a direct view into Daphne and the Duke of Hastings, Simon. But I think just the show had a little bit more description and a little bit of a better peek into their relationship than this book did. Overall, it was good. I'll definitely continue the series and read the rest of the books. I really like Julia Quinn's writing style. It was easy to read, but it wasn't my absolute favorite. And as you can tell, I don't remember a ton about what happened in the book specifically. The next book that I read in July was Not So Lucky by Trelina Pucci. I think that's how you pronounce her name, and also I think that is what her name is. This is a sequel to the Tangled in Tinsel book that was going around Book Talk in December. I rated this one 5 stars. It came out on July 4th or the 2nd, I believe, and I devoured this within one day. I couldn't put it down. It was so spicy. I love the relationship and the bickering. I think it's marketed as a why choose romance, but there wasn't as much why choose in it as I was expecting or that was in the first book, which obviously was totally fine because I really enjoyed the book overall anyway and gave it 5 stars. This follows our main character who goes on a weekend trip for the 4th of July weekend with her friend to Vegas and ends up getting blackout drunk and marries a football player in Vegas, and they are put into a situation where they have to figure out how they're going to divorce and carry on with their normal lives. I love the friendships in this book and the group text messages that was included in the pages. It was just a really fun time. Very spicy, so if you're not into spice, definitely stay away from this one, but a really great time, and I'm so glad that I read it upon release and was able to basically entirely make my own opinions about it. The third book that I read in July is Fatal Voyage by Kathy Reichs. This is the 4th book in the Temperance Brand series. I ended up rating this 4 stars. I really enjoyed my time with this. I was really excited to be back in this world and following another forensic murder case. This one was about a plane crash, which ended up being a lot more layered when Brennan found a severed foot, I believe, which ended up not being related to the plane crash and was trying to just figure out where it came from. And also trying to figure this out upon being blocked off from a lot of the investigation and resources that she would normally have. This was a really fun time. I am very excited to read the next book in the series. Again, this is the book series which inspired the show Bones, which is one of my absolute favorite TV series. The series is definitely different to how they adapted the TV show, but the heart of it, the crime and forensic investigation, is really my favorite part and done really well. Book number 4 that I read in July was The Fine Print by Lauren Asher. This was my very first Lauren Asher book, and I rated this 4 stars. I really enjoyed Lauren Asher's writing style. I found it very easy to follow and very easy to digest. I loved the theme park, Disney-esque vibe of the amusement park that Rowan and his family owned. Zara was very strong-willed and cared a lot about other people and sort of helping the park become the best that it can be and represent every culture, and as well as being accessible to all. I really appreciated that message, and it also delved into some deeper, important messages about working and fair wages and employee rights. So I appreciated all of that, but I did. No, Ron was just such an ass, and not like in the best way at all times. And then Zara was really, I don't know, just some of the things at the beginning of the book when she spoke out to Rowan really bothered me. Like, I understand that Rowan is kind of an ass, but you also don't talk to your superiors like that. Like, yes, stand up for what you believe in, but also, like, don't be entitled. Basically, the plot of this book is Rowan's grandfather passes away, and him and his brothers are given a task that they have to complete in order to receive their inheritance. And Rowan has to create a plan that is approved by a board of members of his grandfather's choosing for the next stages of the park. Overall, I'm excited to continue the series as well as read more books from Lauren Asher. The next book I read in July was called That One Night by Emily Rath. This was a very, very short prequel novella to the Pucking Around series. I ended up rating this 4 stars. This was about a one-night stand, and that's it. It followed the one night. It was very spicy. It had a lot of tension, and I just loved the chemistry between the two characters, and I'm very intrigued as to what happens in the rest of the series or the next book. I'm assuming that these are our main characters that end up meeting again. But yeah, it was just a really fun, spicy time. And yeah, very excited for the rest of the books in the series. Halfway there, the 6th book that I read in July was The Sun and the Star by Rick Riordan and Mark Oshiro. This is the newest installment in the Percy Jackson universe. This follows Nico D'Angelo and his boyfriend Will when Nico begins hearing voices saying that they need Nico's help, and him and Will have to venture down into Tartarus to find out who is calling for them and save them. This was a really fun time. I loved the LGBTQ plus rep as well as the message about mental health and PTSD and being who you are. This was just a really impactful book that I think everyone who grew up on Percy Jackson needed and wanted, and is a really important message for all of the kids who are reading Percy Jackson for the first time. This had great callbacks to moments and scenes in previous books in the entire Percy Jackson universe. It was just really nice to see, and it was just a really great time to jump back into this world and see these characters again. It was very nostalgic. Book number 7 was Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. I have read this a number of years ago and almost entirely forgot the plot of the book and wanted to read it again. There was definitely aspects of this book that I totally forgot about or misremembered it. So on the second read, I ended up rating this 4 stars, and it definitely didn't like punch me as hard as it did the first time, although I saw the twist coming from a mile away because I had read it before and I think I just remembered everything slightly. So Tate ends up moving in with her brother as she gets a new job and tries to piece her life together and until she can get her own place, where Miles is passed out in front of her brother's door when she gets there, and they end up bumping into each other over and over again and kind of have this connection and end up having a friends with benefits sort of situation. We get a dual POV as well as a dual timeline because Miles has this hidden secret and traumatic past where he says that he will never love again. And we're just trying to figure out why or what might have happened for him to think that. Like all of Colleen Hoover's books, this was very quick read, very easy to get into, obviously very emotionally and traumatic. But overall, I did enjoy my time with this, and I think this is one of her better books. The next book that I read was The Ritual by Chantal Tessier. This was my first like dark romance book, and I ended up rating this 4 stars. I really enjoyed this one. I will say this is an extremely dark romance book, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend going into it first, and definitely check the trigger warnings if you are sensitive or new to the dark romance genre. This is about a secret society in college where all of the men have a 3-year-long initiation, and at the end of it are awarded a woman that they can do what they want with as they're chosen, and their lives are kind of laid out for them. It's a very violent and cutthroat kind of secret society. They all end up getting into extremely dangerous situations, as well as putting their chosens into these extremely dangerous situations just based on their proximity to the members. I really liked the relationship and the growth between our 2 main characters. Their love, although it was messy and aggressive and dark, it was very sweet. And I'm definitely looking forward to reading more by this author. My only real complaint was that sometimes it seemed like you were gaining an inch, and then all of a sudden they would turn and be so angry at each other again. I'm like, there's no like moment where they should have been like angry. Like you didn't see them changing emotions or anything. They just like did a 180 and was like, oh, I'm mad at you now. And I felt like it could also have been a little bit shorter. This was almost 600 pages, or just over 600 pages, and it was between like half and like 3/4 of the way through the book, it was starting to slow down a little bit, and it just seemed like there was stuff happening to the characters just for the sake of them happening. There was a lot of twists and uncovered secrets that was really fun to explore. The next book that I read was Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. I rated this 5 stars. I absolutely loved this book. I loved the dual timeline. I loved the summer vibes. It just made me want to go to a lake and go sit by the cottage. It really gave me nostalgia to my childhood summers and going to visit my grandparents' cottage every year. I literally read a book, rate it 5 stars, and have not a clue what our main characters' names are. So basically, our female main character's family buys a cottage up in like northeastern Ontario, and right next door is a family who lives there all year round and has 2 boys. And the then timeline follows them growing up and how their relationships change until something happens that results in them not speaking for 10 years until the boy's mother passes away, and our female main character is invited to her funeral, and they sort of figure out what happened 10 years ago and see if they can move forward from it. This was heartbreaking. It was hopeful. It was messy and gave you like real, like it felt like a real teenage romance, and how messy and uncoordinated growing up is. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was a fun time. And I'm very excited to read Meet Me at the Lake by Carly Fortune, although I'm 150th in line at my library, so I'll probably read it next year. The next book that I read in July was Queen of Shadows by Sarah J. Maas. This is the 5th book in the Throne of Glass series. As I've stated ad nauseum on my channel, I am buddy reading this with my friend Emily. She'll be linked down below. I'm not going to talk too much about this book because it is the 5th book in the series. I ended up reading this 5 stars, although I felt like it was a little bit slower than the previous 2 books, but I felt like we also took a lot longer reading this one. And typically Emily and I read 5 chapters a day unless something comes up and we can't quite meet our daily chapters. So I think we had some interruptions more than usual in this book, so it just felt like it was taking a lot longer. I absolutely love the characters. We got so many POVs in this book in particular, and there's just so many things happening all over the world that are all coming together into the overall conflict in the series. We got some reveals in this one which were wild. Some people are not who they appear to be. I'm having the best time with the series, and every time I finish a book, I want to start the whole series over again. If you haven't picked up Throne of Glass, I highly recommend it. I also highly recommend reading Assassin's Blade first. I personally love a linear timeline, and I love getting Selena's background ahead of time before we find out what's happening to her currently, and then having to go back to the Assassin's Blade. It's amazing. 2 books left. The next book is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I ended up rating this 4 stars. I read Beach Read last summer and absolutely enjoyed it, so I was very excited to pick up Book Lovers. I didn't quite enjoy Book Lovers as much as Beach Read. This book is following Nora, who's very fits into her box and has her schedules and routines and works really hard at her job, but doesn't really have time or gives time to fun or just like whimsy. And so her sister Libby creates this spur of the moment trip to Sunshine Falls, North Carolina, which is the setting for one of Libby's favorite books, and doing all the typical small town romance bucket list items. And it's about her, Nora, finding love and trying to adjust her life or learn what she actually loves out of life, and as well as dealing with some childhood trauma. This is good. I enjoyed my time. I'm not really sure what else to say about this one. I really love Emily Henry's writing. Yeah, that's all I have to say about this one. Then the last book that I read in July was The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston. I rated this 4 stars, I believe. I really enjoyed this. I loved Ashley Poston's The Dead Romantics. This one similarly has a very unique plot. It follows Clementine, who recently inherited her aunt's apartment after she passes away, and this apartment is magical and will take you back in time 7 years when Clementine meets this man, and she has to try and figure out who he is, as well as dealing with her current timeline and grief of losing her aunt and trying to figure out where she wants to go with her life. I loved the writing style. It was so easy to fall into, and it was just like such a magical time, although it was fairly heavy and you weren't sure if they were going to make it out and it was all going to work out. But I loved it. It was such a good read. So those are all 12 of the books that I read in July. Definitely a very reading heavy month this month. I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you have read any of these books down below or if any of them are on your TBR, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!